9 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as a participant. For a menu of available commands, press *#.
Like I said, I'll open it up for questions after each of the sections, but just to cut down on background noise, if you could just hit mute while we go through each of those sections. So I know there's been a lot of questions to the state office about the new initiatives put out by U.S. Soccer, and so just want to make sure that maybe we can just, if somebody has a question about something, I thought maybe for the good of everybody in the state, it'd be good if you asked the question, because I'm sure a lot of other people in the state have the exact same questions. And so maybe we could just, hit everybody's concerns and questions at the same time. So please, it's a dialogue. I don't want to just be talking the entire time. So if you do have a question, like I said, after each section, I'll just open it up and you can unmute your phones and ask away, and we'll do the best we can. But I would like to keep the call to an hour just to be respectful of everybody's time. I know everybody's busy. He's got a lot of other stuff going on besides soccer. It's hard for me to comprehend that, but I do realize that that's other people's lives besides soccer. So, we'll jump in. So just real quick, in case you're not familiar, but the player development initiatives were put out by U.S. Soccer about 2 years ago when they first started the conversation. About a year and a half ago is when they released the stuff about the concussions, which is kind of what initiated this whole thing, and then they released the player development initiatives for small-sided games. So just wanting to make sure everybody realizes that this is being kind of mandated to us by U.S. Soccer, who is the governing body of all organized soccer in the United States, and all of their members and affiliates are being asked to comply with this. And South Dakota State Soccer Association is an affiliate of U.S. Soccer. U.S. Youth Soccer, our national governing body, is also a member of U.S. Soccer. And so as members of U.S. Soccer, we are going to comply, and we're going to do our best to follow suit with the rest of the country. And it's not just U.S. Youth, but also U.S. Club, AYSO, SAY, U.S. Amateur for their youth programs. So everybody who's involved in what's called Zone 1 soccer, which is ages 0 to 12, is being asked to comply with these mandates from U.S. Soccer. So just to clarify, it wasn't a decision by South Dakota Soccer to make these changes, but we're going to do the best that we can to comply with what U.S. Soccer is asking us to do. So just going to talk about the three main initiatives that have been given out to us, and just kind of go through how South Dakota State Soccer Association is trying to comply and kind of where we're at. Obviously, most of you know that we've already tried to comply with the concussion stuff as of the spring season. And I know a lot of other organizations are following suit with us in the state. And the biggest thing is right now, these mandates are strong recommendations, and come 2017, they will become mandates. And so everybody's going to be told that you must comply. So we decided just to go ahead and do it. Originally, it was said that we had to be comply by January 1st of 2017. So when we made the decision to go by that, we decided, well, we might as well do it in the fall, because it's going to be really stressful to try and make changes in the middle of a competitive season for us, because our competitive season still runs August to July. So we just figured it'd be easier, because of all of our referees will be certified right now, and we don't want to have to re-educate the referees and educate coaches and tournament directors and leagues all over again between the fall and the spring season. So we thought it'd be easiest to just go ahead and do it in the fall, even though the mandates weren't supposed to be mandatory until January 1st, 2017. Most of the states, and before we made that decision, we asked most of the states around us. North Dakota is also complying. Nebraska, Iowa are also complying. Minnesota is complying with the birth year and the concussion. They're waiting to comply with the small-sided games rules. But most of the states around us were going to comply this fall, so we thought we'll follow suit, and it just kind of made sense for us. I'm not sure. Nope, not sure why that's there. What's going on? I'm not sure why this box is here. All right. So the 3 primary mandates, and I'll go through each of these 3. The first one was head injury, concussion, and heading initiatives. The second was the birth year registration initiative, and the third is the small-sided games standards. So we'll go through each of those 3, and like I said, I'll open it up for questions at the end of each of those 3, and then for the small-sided games, I'll open it up after each of the categories of small-sided games. Okay, so the heading and concussion initiative. Players that are 10 years old and younger are not allowed to head the ball in training or in games. U.S. Soccer clarified for us that they wish that no age divisions, 11 under and younger, are going to be allowed to have heading in games because the 11 under age division still includes 10-year-olds, so nobody in that age division is going to be allowed to head balls. So I know most of our associations just go by the even age groups, so usually 8s, 10s, 12s, 14s. So for most associations, it's going to be 10s, no heading, 12s, they're allowed to head. U.S. Soccer did say if kids are going to play up, so if you have 11s playing, if you have kids that are truly an 11 under team playing up into a 12 under division, then the parents and the coaches and the players are accepting the risk to play up in a division that does allow heading, but trying themselves not to head the ball themselves. It's not going to be up to the referees to know which kids on the field are 11 unders and which kids are 12 unders. If you do have an 11 under age division, then that would be the last division where you're not allowed to head in games or in training. If any kid intentionally tries to head the ball, the referees have been instructed to call an indirect free kick from that spot. And obviously the main thing is intentionally heading. Obviously the 12 and under, 13 under age divisions, they will be allowed to head the ball. You're allowed to work with them for a maximum of 30 minutes a week in training on heading and not making contact with the ball with their head more than 15 to 20 times per week per player. But they are allowed to intentionally try to head the ball in a game situation. But they want to try and keep the limit of how many headers per week to that 15 to 20 or 30 minutes max per week. Any players in any age division, if there are symptoms or suspected to have a concussion, we are being required to pull that player off, and they are not allowed to come back into the game until they have been cleared by a certified healthcare professional. So some festivals and tournaments may not have a certified healthcare professional on site. That's up to the hosting organizations to decide how are they going to handle those things. Are they going to send them to an urgent care clinic? Are you going to send them to the emergency room? But they must be cleared by a certified healthcare professional. The referees are being told that they're not allowed to let those players back in until they've been cleared by a certified healthcare professional. And it should be the same thing in leagues, hopefully in your local leagues and things as well. So I'll open it up for questions about the heading and concussion initiatives right now.
Hey, Jeremy?
Anybody? Yes.
Yeah, Frank Gernick. Who is determining on the field the extent to which a player may or may not have concussion-like symptoms?
I mean, first and foremost, it's going to be the responsibility of the referees. They're in charge of the safety of the players. And then second would definitely be the coaches.
Okay. And again, you know how I operate with you. I understand South Dakota is an exception, but again, a lot of our associations rely on referees that are going to be between the ages of 13 and 17. Do we feel as though they're going to be respected with regards to enforcing this rule?
Sure, that's a great question.
And if they're required to turn in numbers and whatnot, for their post-game, post-match report, because I would assume that any player that's asked to leave the field for this will be required to have their number taken down so that we are tracking that. Yes or no?
Yes, I would encourage whether if it's an event like a tournament or something like that, I would definitely encourage them to host to have some kind of system set up, just like you would for a red card. So, yeah, obviously we use really young referees for some of these younger age groups. But even in the older age groups, I mean, the concussion symptoms applies to all age divisions. So I think that's where it comes our job as the administrators and leaders of our clubs to educate our coaches and just let them know that this is something very, very serious, and we're not going to deal with it. We're not going to put up with anybody berating a young referee about this at all. So obviously, then it goes on our referee education system to help educate, which I know is asking a lot. But, you know, I think in general, especially with the younger ages where some of these younger referees would be in charge of the games, any head to the ball or any ball to the head, and, you know, the kids are dazed and confused and saying their heads hurt or go to the ground, you know, those types of things, I think for the safety of the player, those are the things that hopefully we're educating them on. What are the signs and symptoms? And U.S. Soccer has said they're going to be adding that. Also, along with this, the states, Region 2, we're trying to figure out a good way to have coaches. So probably starting next season, so the 2017-18 season, coaches and referees are all going to be required to take the CDC concussion and head injury, you know, course. And I know a lot of people have already taken that multiple times. I take it about twice a year just to take teams to Minnesota. But I think that information also is going to be helpful. So not every situation is going to be perfect, but hopefully tournament coordinators and that kind of stuff can help enforce those as well if we're having a situation with a parent or a coach who's not being disrespectful of a referee who's trying to do the right thing.
Great answer.
Sure, it is, Kevin. I just have, you know, I remember when small-sided games started up and then things like this come up, and then our teams would go to Iowa or Nebraska and they'd be doing just whatever they wanted to do without any sort of pressure from USU Soccer. And I'm just, are we going to run into that next summer, you think? Or are they going to be just under pretty good pressure to follow the same rules under which we're playing?
Yeah, like I said, as best as I can tell, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and North Dakota have all decided to comply, especially with the concussion. And starting this fall, they're all going to comply with the age restrictions. So now, does that mean you still might have a club that's being stubborn about it? Yeah, I can't promise that every single club that hosts an event is going to follow through. But I think the fact that U.S. Soccer is mandating it and not U.S. Youth, I think definitely is lending itself to the fact that more associations are going to be following this rather than not. And U.S. Soccer has even said that they might ask U.S. Club and U.S. Youth to have certain associations not be allowed to host events, which means then your players' insurance wouldn't be valid if they went to those events. So, I mean, U.S. Soccer is definitely trying to put some clout behind this, but I think especially with the concussion stuff, I think you definitely will see some consistency on the rules for continuing to play and needing a healthcare provider to release a player to come back in, those types of things. Any other questions about the heading or concussions? All right, moving along then.
How far are we? Sorry,
What's that?
Gary, one more question. How far are we going to go to certify that a healthcare professional is legitimate and saying somebody can go back to playing? Because I could see this being kind of a mess.
Sure. Yeah,
and I don't know the answer to that at all. I don't think anybody knows.
And I'm going to kind of say the same thing. I'm not entirely sure that we've thought through as a state how we police that. I would hope that, you know, at the minimum, it's a licensed and certified athletic trainer, and I can almost promise you, especially with everything that's going on with concussions in football, athletic trainers are being told that they're not even allowed to release a player back into play, that it has to be an MD. So, you know, at every South Dakota State soccer event, we have trainers available, and so I know that we're going to have those trainers available to talk to the kids, and they're probably going to be telling those kids, we can't release you to go back in. But those trainers will be our certified healthcare providers at the events. You know, I think most of the events in the state, you know, and that's something where maybe we have to bring that up with the state board of directors and say, do we start requiring an athletic trainer to be present as part of the hosting agreement when you apply for, you know, we ask people to turn in a name of a referee assigner, a certified referee assigner. Maybe we start having them turn the name of their certified athletic trainer or something like that. So that's a great question. I'll definitely make a note of that and bring it up to the next board of directors meeting. But I think right now, I would hope the biggest thing is, you know, associations are going to protect themselves against a lawsuit, because here's the thing. The reason U.S. Soccer put this initiative into place is because they got sued. U.S. Youth was part of that lawsuit as well. So U.S. Soccer and U.S. Youth Soccer and U.S. Club got sued by individuals for this very thing. And then part of the settlement was that they agreed that followed by these guidelines at their events. So the precedent has been set. If we are not following these guidelines, there's precedence to be sued for not following those guidelines, because it was part of a settlement for specific issues of concussion, safety of players, those types of things. That's a great question, though. I'll definitely make a note, and maybe we can, maybe that's something we're going to have to look at adding to the hosting agreement for associations for events. Anything else?
No, thanks.
Okay. All right. Birth year registration. I know most of you are going through this currently. Again, it's something that U.S. Soccer has asked all of the membership to comply with. As I mentioned, the states that are immediately surrounding us have said that they all are going to be complying. In fact, most of Region 2, I've only heard of one state that is not doing it this fall, and they're going to wait until 2017 to do it. So every state in Region 2, which is the region we belong to, is going to comply with the birth year registration. So basically, you know, and I know a lot of what, when I go to the board meetings and stuff, a lot of people are scared because their kids are skipping a year and those types of things. And I understand that maybe they're moving from where they were going to play another year of 4v4, and now they're going to play 77, those types of things. I understand that. But honestly, everybody else is making the move at the same time they are, so really we're playing the same age range of kids when we go to events. It's, you know, so honestly, I don't feel like we are skipping a year. Maybe we're skipping a step in the small-sided games. But, you know, I think honestly you're going to be playing against other associations that have kids in the same 12-month period as your kids. A lot of associations are going to be playing with new teams, those types of things. So the main thing was U.S. Soccer's reasoning for this was they wanted to make the relative age effect. So if you can see the image, right, so that's a picture of 12-year-old boys. One of the 12-year-old boys doesn't even come to the other kid's shoulder. They're trying to get, they're not trying to get rid of it, because within a 12-month period you're always going to have it, but they're trying to make it easier for coaches and parents to recognize if you're a January to June birth, you're probably going to be a little bit bigger, faster, stronger than the kids who are born July to December. And now it might be a little bit easier to understand that because everybody's the same birth year. And so you just know the kids born in the first half year might be a little bit bigger, faster, stronger. And so maybe you organize trainings a little bit more appropriately, knowing that some of these kids are 364 days older than other kids in the same age group. The other thing is, too, you know, they want to make everything in the country align the same, because ODP currently is by birth years. You know, and so they just thought maybe if we had everybody doing the same thing, it'd be less confusing. And honestly, and I tell this story every time I've gone to a different club board meeting, I grew up playing by birth year. I moved overseas, and I continued to play by birth year. When I came back to the U.S. and saw we were playing by grades, it floored me. I didn't know we'd made the change. So I didn't know any different growing up. Came to the U.S., adapted to it, coaching kids by grades, and now we're moving back to birth year. It's definitely a change. It's definitely an adjustment for parents and players. But the idea is it's going to be easier to identify kids within the birth year of who probably is going to be a little bit more developed than other kids. So this is the for this current season and for the upcoming season, just kind of lays out for every age group what birth year. So for under 6s or 6 and unders, it's 2011. For 7 and unders, it's 2010. Honestly, it's going to be a lot easier for me to explain to parents what age group their kids belong in. Some of the questions that I've encountered with this, besides the skipping a year stuff, has been, you know, so come January, do they join a new team? No. They are. So our competitive season still runs August to July. So for this season, 2016-17, so August 2016 through July 2017, if you're born in 2011, you are a 6 and under for the entire competitive season. Obviously, in the United States, we have high school sports, regardless of the state you're in, but they run, usually high school sports run somewhere between August to May. You know, in the South, they play soccer in the winter. Up here, we play soccer in the fall. In Nebraska, they play soccer in the spring. So club championships are always going to be in July. Regional and national championships will always be in June and July. So our competitive season ends in July, and there's just not going to be any way around that. So that won't change. So your child is, so once they register for a team in August, they will be on that 6 and under team for the entire competitive season. And then come August 2017, they'll move up to 7 and unders. So there was a little bit of confusion. Why, if we're doing it by birth year in January, does that mean they're on a new birth year team? No, they're on the same team throughout. They're just on a team with everybody that was born the same year they were. Any questions about the birth year stuff? Guys, take it easy on me. All right. Well, then I'll move on to the. Sorry, was there somebody saying something?
Hey, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Just for fun, okay? Yep. Since there's a bashful crowd here, what is this identification that you keep talking about, and what are we identifying them for, and why is it important for me in Sioux Falls to have to comply with this initiative over this identification thing you keep talking about? And understand, Jeremy, you know that some of my questions are to set up your answer as well as echo what some people are thinking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
What is this population that we're looking at, that we're identifying? So that's my question.
Yep. So, I mean, even in South Dakota, we are trying to identify players for another level. In our state, it's called the Olympic Development Program, right? And ultimately, U.S. Soccer, because the rest of the world does organize teams by birth year, and so U.S. Soccer organizes the national team programs by birth year as well. That's why Olympic Development Program has always been by birth year, because it's a feeder program for the national team system. So, you know, bringing our club system into alignment with that, you know, honestly, as a state staff member and as a member of ODP Region 2 staff, it's going to be a little bit easier for me to go to a tournament here in South Dakota and know that I'm watching the 2003s, and if there are kids that we should be identifying for ODP while we're watching that game, you know, it makes it a little bit easier for me to know which age group are they going to fit into, where would they fit in, are they good enough to fit into that age group. So obviously it's for the top 1%, the whole identification process, but I think U.S. Soccer also just wanted to make it everything uniform from the top all the way down, and that way it just makes everything flow a little bit easier, makes everybody working in the same system instead of switching over to a different system when you do participate with ODP and those types of things. But we had over 400 kids participate in ODP this last year from the Dakotas. And so, you know, again, it's a small percentage of the 16,000 kids we had registered, but it's going to make our job a little bit easier when we do go to some of these tournaments to possibly identify kids that participate in that event. Anything else?
Yeah, I had a question about concussions before we get into the small-sided games.
Sure.
You guys are identifying the healthcare professional from the standpoint of hosting a tournament, but what about a local league? Because really, 8 and younger is where you get a lot of high enrollment, but are you saying like for Vermilion or for any other clubs we need to have a staff professional at the development league activities?
Well, so my recommendation for that would be, especially for in-house leagues, I would hope that you guys have a system of monitoring, okay, this kid was pulled out because of concussion symptoms, and so they need a note from a doctor to get their player card back, or something like that, right? Because league, usually you're only playing 1 game in a day, so the need to be evaluated and possibly returned to play the next day because it's a tournament isn't as high because it's a league, so they're probably playing 1 game, and then they go home, right? And then they have a couple days between this league game and their next league game. So in-house league, I would say probably having a protocol for your association set up where if a referee pulls a kid for concussion symptoms, they need to report that to your league administrator or league director, and then whether it's taking their player card from the coach or making note of that person and identifying who the referee is for the next, however you guys want to do that. And then they just have to have something submitted to the league administrator before that child is, you know, released to play, return to play. That would be my recommendation for in-house leagues.
All right, good enough. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else before I move on to small-sided? I don't want to run over people here. All right, so small-sided standards. So trying to, and this is a tough one for states like ours to understand because South Dakota has been really good about playing small-sided games for Zone 1, which again is 0 to 12-year-old kids. The hard thing for us to understand is a lot of the United States does not play small-sided games. And, you know, I come from Southern California, and we have some leagues down there that are playing 11-a-side for U10s. And so basically U.S. Soccer has come in and said, we're not going to put up with this anymore. 8 and 10-year-olds should not be playing 11-a-side soccer. They're not playing for a World Cup. This is absolutely ridiculous. Kids need to have fun. They need to touch the ball more often. They need to play on a smaller field. And especially for the youngest age groups, they need to play quarters because their energy systems and physiology just do not lend to playing 2 halves of soccer. Some teams for younger age groups have massive rosters, and they take 20 kids, 20 10-year-olds to go play an 11-a-side tournament, and the kids are playing 25% of the games because they're playing for the U10 Blitz Cup. And, you know, it's just something that U.S. Soccer is trying to put an end to and trying to basically mandate that all Zone 1 kids are playing small-sided, not playing for championships, playing to have fun, and playing in a safe environment. So for our state, it's probably hard to understand why we're making the switch because as far as I can tell, we've always bought into the small-sided philosophy and felt like it's a positive thing for our kids. And U.S. Youth is the same way. U.S. Youth Soccer has been pushing small-sided games for 30 years, but other organizations have not. And so U.S. Soccer basically just decided we're going to come in and standardize this. Everybody's going to have to play by the same numbering system, and we're going to make the game the best for the kids and their development and for them having fun. So that's basically the objective behind this small-sided standardization. And again, like I said, it's hard for our state to understand because we do play small-sided, but it is something I think is very good that U.S. Soccer is requiring, and it should have been done a long time ago, and U.S. Youth tried to do it, but obviously there's other organizations that could do whatever they wanted because they weren't members of U.S. Youth, and so U.S. Soccer coming in and saying this is definitely a positive thing. So I'll just kind of break it down. This is the basic, and you guys should have, I sent this out to all the presidents and technical directors or directors of coaching. You all should have received, your clubs all should have received this. And it was in a little bit more of a, it was a longer PowerPoint, obviously. It wasn't on one sheet like this. There was a sheet like this in that PowerPoint, but I just kind of, and I expanded this a little bit. And I'll make this PowerPoint available on the website as well after this presentation. But just kind of the breakdown of the different age divisions, 6 under through 12 under, the field sizes, the ranges for the field sizes, the maximum size for goals for each of the age divisions, the ball size, how many players on the field, no goalkeepers for 6 under through 8 under, the roster limits, and then game times, and whether or not they're playing with an offside rule. So the comment I want to make for this is moving forward with the state, these are things for you to start looking into for when you host events. And the main thing will be you can play, if you want to play 6v6 for 9 under, fair enough, but we won't sanction you to play 8v8. You know, we want to make sure that the maximum number of players on the field is abiding by U.S. Soccer. If you want to play 3v3 for 6 and unders like U.S. Youth has always advocated for, fantastic. But we're not going to let you play 7v7 with 6 and unders. Also, the roster limits, we received a lot of questions about those. So for us as a state, if you're going to be traveling to an event, these are the numbers that we ask you to abide by. Now, if you're playing an in-house league, and obviously it makes sense to have 8 kids on a 4v4 team because 2 of the kids might have dentist appointments the day that you're playing a league game, fair enough. But we're not generating rosters from the state. So at the state level, you can just put a pool of players at the 6 and under age group together and then take 6 kids that are definitely going to be able to go to the event and take them to an event. The main thing is U.S. Soccer is wanting these kids to play more and sit on the bench less. So that's kind of their reasoning behind the roster sizes. And South Dakota State Soccer, we're going to try and follow that. So when you request a travel roster or an event roster, you'll see these roster limits applied to those event rosters. But if you have a pool of players, you can have as many kids in that pool as you want. If you're playing an in-house league and you want to just have 8 kids on a 4v4 roster so you can practice effectively, fair enough. But if you decide to go an event, put the 6 kids on the roster. Same thing with the game times. If the maximum is 4x10 for quarters, but you want to play 4x8s, definitely. But we're not going to allow you to play 2 25-minute halves for 6 and unders. So when you submit your rules for events to host, these will be the maximums that we're going to ask to abide by. Obviously, the one thing is the goal sizes. We're not going to ask every association in the state to buy new goals, and that's something we're going to bring up with the board of directors, whether we set out a 5-year plan, something like that, to try and help. You know, there's some other programs that are coming into place to try and help bring associations into compliance with this, so that'll probably be more of a decision at the state level. How much are we going to enforce that? But I think for the most part, most of our associations are within those limits anyways for most of our goal sizes. Because like I said, South Dakota's been very good about trying to do the small-sided games as it is. So I'll break it down by the number on the field, and then I'll open it up for questions after each of these. So 4v4, 77, and 99. So 4v4, U.S. Soccer is asking that every coach that's coaching 4v4 has at least an F license. For us also, we have the Youth Module 1 that covers those age groups as well. No formal games or league are needed. So this would be kind of an academy atmosphere where they're training 1 to 2 times per week, and at the end of each of those trainings, they're playing a small game. And every time they come together, you're putting them on, and if they train with a specific group, then you're dividing them up into different teams every time at the end of training. So they're playing with different kids, getting to know different kids, playing with different skill levels, and coaches are allowed to move kids from one game to another game. If one team is just absolutely blowing out the other team, they can take the best player from that team, move them over to another field where maybe another team isn't doing as well. And so the goal is, after every game, that almost all the games are within 1 or 2 goals, and the kids are just having fun. It's a good competitive game where kids are getting better. We don't want to keep results. We don't want to keep standings or records. So no real formal teams, no permanent rosters. Like I said, probably should just be registering kids in pools for these age groups, and just having some of that flexibility. Everyone should be playing at least 50% when you do play a game. Travel should be limited to probably, and obviously we're a little bit different than some of the people that wrote these rules, but they're saying they don't want kids to travel outside of town. For us, sometimes it's hard to get some of these kids games because maybe we only have 2 U8 teams and we want to play somebody different. So fair enough, but we should be trying to limit travel as much as possible for these kids, and shouldn't be participating in any tournament events. We don't need registered and certified referees because the game should be a part of training events, basically, is what they're saying. And obviously the priority is to have fun and play in a safe environment. So, and no goalkeepers at this level. It's just 4 players on the field. Questions about 4 versus 4? Wow.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yes.
Frank here.
Yes, sir.
I don't have a question. That was well done.
Okay. Thanks for making my ego bigger, Frank.
It's okay. I'm just letting you know I'm still here.
Awesome. Okay. Anybody on 4v4? All right. I will move on to 77 then. All right, so 77, coaches should have an F license or youth module 2. Training to game ratio, so now they can be playing regularly scheduled games, but we want to make sure they have 1 or 2 trainings per game that they play. So if they're playing in events like festivals and stuff where they might play 3 games on the weekend, then hopefully they're having at least 2 weeks of training leading up to that event so that you're working on developing good skills, having fun, mixing kids around different positions, that type of stuff. And then in the events that you play, gives them a little outside competition, but we want to make sure that we're working on developing good habits as more than we are just letting them play, and resorting to their old habits. Players should not participate in more than 20 games per calendar year, no more than 1 game per day. Results and standings should not be recorded. Everyone should play a minimum of 50% in a game. Tournament events should have a predetermined number of games with no advancement or championship. So basically they're saying if you register for the Central South Dakota Invitational and for 10 and unders it's going to be 3 games, then there's no more than 3 games. You know going into the weekend that you're registering for 3 games and there's no advancement, there's no championship match for this age group. So just trying to monitor and just trying to make sure that the physical tax on kids is not something that it doesn't need to be, and we're not focusing on winning as much as we are on we're playing the game the right way and playing the game the way it should be played. This is also the age where we have the build-out lines. The build-out lines are supposed to be halfway between the top of the penalty area and the halfway line on your field. And obviously that might be different on certain fields because we have a maximum and a minimum for the lengths. And the opposition is supposed to stay behind that line until the ball is kicked and passed by the goalkeeper, whether with their foot, whether from their hands. There is no punting allowed at this age group, neither for the 4v4, because heading's not allowed for these age groups. So no punting, so the ball is supposed to be played on the ground. Once the pass is made, players can leave that restriction line and put pressure on the ball, but we're trying to encourage the kids to play the ball to someone's feet in their half and build out of their half into the attacking half.
You want to go over that a little bit more in detail?
Go ahead.
I don't get it. So in other words, there's no goal kick anymore. There is
a goal kick. And if you...
That page 29 of that PDF didn't clarify that, and so that's why I'm confused.
Sure.
So it sounds like you're not supposed to.
Yep. So the only rule from the laws of the game that has changed is the build-out line and the heading rule. So basically, if we're asking, even if it's a goal kick, the goalkeeper puts the ball on the goal box and plays the ball to one of their teammates outside the penalty area. After that pass, the other team can come into that area from the restriction line and put pressure on the ball. So it's the same as any other thing. It's just we're asking the other team to drop back to that line to basically allow, because, I mean, we've all seen the 10 and under, 9 and under games. Some of those kids can't get the ball outside the box, right? And then trying to play that ball when another player is standing right next to them, it's almost impossible to get the ball out of the box or to get the ball out of their half or to even try and attempt a pass. So we're basically asking the opponents to stand behind the restriction line, the build-out line, and after the pass is made, then they can come put pressure on the ball. So basically we're playing first pass is free, right? Whether it's from their hands, whether it's from their feet, or whatever.
Well, then explain the punting aspect.
So they're not allowed to punt the ball. So goalkeepers aren't allowed to drop the ball and kick it, basically, right? We don't want the ball in the air. Yeah, we just don't want the ball in the air to encourage heading.
I see, okay.
But they can put the ball on the ground and kick it out. If they make a save, they're allowed to put the ball on the ground and make a pass, and the other team can't come put pressure on them until they've made the pass.
Okay, it makes sense now.
Okay, great. Other questions?
You got my email about the wording of where to place that line.
Sure.
I still think the way it is that there's only 15.5 yards. I don't see why any coach should send anyone after a goal kick. They're already going to be compact. They're going to be organized in a very small area. So I think it kind of encourages a long ball. Get the goal kick, get your head up, and send it over, because you pretty much got a meat grinder in front of you. Where when the regional rollout was only 47 yards long, you gave you 19 yards to play, and then on the shortest field right now, you only have 15.5. And so that's why I've been hung up on why they worded it that way, because as I interpret it, it may not be that hard to defend against, but very hard to tell a new coach or a new player who's never done offsides, because Vermilion's pretty much volunteer. Hey, you got less than 8 yards to teach offsides to your kids. So that's why I think we should change the language, and because it doesn't look anything like the picture. My offside lines on a 55-yard field goes through my circle.
Yep. Well, I get it, and I saw the pictures you sent me, and it does look a little strange. But honestly, I think it's going to be easier to teach coaches what offsides is with a line rather than telling them it's the second-to-last player that's defending. I mean, offsides is a hard thing for new parent coaches and parents and players to understand. I think actually a line is going to make it a little bit easier for them. And then, like I said, I will concede to your point, but I have never, ever seen 9- and 10-year-olds be able to restrain themselves from going at the ball. I just haven't. I haven't seen a 10 and under team sit and play a low-pressure system. I have never seen it. I think as soon as that pass is made, several players are going to go into that space, and it's going to open the game up. I totally understand what you're saying, and if I was playing with adults, I definitely would have the same concerns you would have. They would just sit in that space and clog the game up. I just haven't seen very many 9 and 10-year-olds have the composure and restraint to not go and put pressure on the ball. So I honestly think once the game is being played, I don't think it's going to be as congested of an area as we think it might be. But I definitely understand what you're saying, for sure. Frank, do you want to explain what you guys are doing at Dakota Alliance for this? Frank?
With regards to the restraining line, you mean?
Yeah, the build-out line.
What we're deciding to do with the restraining line is actually using the halfway line. And the reason we want to use the halfway line is twofold. One, Jeremy already discussed the field sizes. The field sizes we're going to use, those build-out lines would be part of the circle, and we don't want to play that way. So the halfway line, which is also the offsides line, we just wanted to keep it consistent throughout the development. So that's how we're going to play it. We won't have the goalkeepers punting the ball, and I think that's it. The only, with regards to the build-out and the whole punting, Jeremy, the only concern I have, and I emailed that to you as well.
Yeah.
We do allow punting at U11.
Yeah.
To head it, they should probably be consistent throughout all those age groups.
Yeah, and I forwarded that on to the Youth Technical Council as well and asked them to consider that, because you're right, asking kids not to head a ball but telling them now they're allowed to punt because it's a little bit bigger of a field, you're still asking for the same issue. I completely understand that concern, and I've passed that on to the National Youth Technical Council.
I've got a question for Frank then.
Yes, sir.
When it comes then to your tournament, or I guess any other time that you're inviting outside teams to play and they're using the build-out line, yet you're using the half line, are you going to communicate? I mean, you're just going to communicate that to everybody who's going to register to play with you, or?
Yes, we will submit that. We will submit that as part of the rules to host the event that has to be approved by SDSSA. So we would be, you know, basically telling the state association, here's how we're going to be running the tournament, and if there's any issues, the state would be raising a red flag with us by either accepting or rejecting our application for a tournament. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm sure that's a problem you've anticipated. I just know we had some teams that complained when they went to the Dakota Alliance tournament this summer that all of a sudden they weren't getting called for doing headers, or they were intentionally, you know, they weren't doing headers, but the other teams were, and hey, you know, they got advantages because of that. And
correct.
I think it was just a matter of maybe they didn't read the rules ahead of time or something. I don't know, but.
Well, correct, but nothing was to be mandated until 2017 anyways. So, you know, like most tournaments, every team has to comply with whatever the rules of the event are, and there are events all around us whose rules are different than the weekend we played before. So when in Rome, you read the rules of that event, and you, so.
I guess I would just want the state to make it consistent pretty much for everybody, at least within South Dakota, but that's just my 2 cents. So.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the thing that because Frank and I have had this discussion, he's told us that, especially for his in-house league, he's going to use the half. And so I think it's something where, for me personally, right, my biggest thing is I want to encourage the concept of a build-out line to allow kids to have that first pass in their half, so that we're not necessarily complying with specifically the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law, right? Trying to encourage kids to play on the ground, to build out of their defensive half into the attacking half. I think it makes the most sense to have the build-out line, especially when maybe other events and tournaments and states around us are going to be using those things. So that's going to be something where, you know, we're going to have to bring it up with the development committee and just, you know, say, hey, this is what Dakota Alliance is going to do when they host an event. How do we want the state to approach that? I agree with you. The consistency factor is probably an issue, but at the same time, if we say the build-out line is the half, at least then we're using a build-out line, right? But that's definitely a conversation that we're going to have with the development committee and with Dakota Alliance. But at least they're having some kind of build-out line.
I mean, for me, it does make sense what CASC is doing because they're going to have to learn that anyway. That, I mean, it just, you're offside when you're on the other opponent's half. So,
sure. Yeah.
It is what it is, and I guess we just deal with it.
And the challenge, and again, the challenge does become, that's when it's on the smallest field, right? So now when it's on the largest field that's allowed within the minimum maximum, how does that change it? So now, are we giving a bigger advantage then to the team that's trying to build out, and just things like that. And I could see it going both ways. It makes sense for me if you're on the smallest end of the spectrum. It doesn't make as much sense to me when you're on the bigger side of the spectrum for the field size.
Why did they take the language out? Before Thursday's email, the rule on offsides was in addition to FIFA's offside rule, which would be the half line, would be the play-out line. And then when the PDF came out last week, they said skip the half line part, pretty much skip over FIFA, and your play-out line is your half offside line. And that's, again, where I was getting annoyed with where that's placed if there isn't consistency.
Well, I honestly think they did it because the argument that you had, now it's even a smaller space, right? So now you're talking about less than an 8-yard space. If offside is the half, but they're not allowed to put pressure in front of that build-out line, now everybody's standing between the build-out line and the half. So I think when they looked at that, they said, man, that's really congested. And so maybe it should be build-out line to build-out line.
Right.
Any other questions about the 77 model? Okay, so we'll wrap up with the 10v10. U.S. Soccer would like these coaches to have the F and the E license. Again, that's Youth Module 2, as well as what we offer here in the state. Training to game ratio should be 2 to 3 trainings per game played. Results and standings still should not be recorded. Everyone still should be playing a minimum of 50% of a game. Tournament events still should be only the predetermined number of games with no advancement or championships. Other than the numbers that are on the, other than the numbers, laws of the game for 10v, I'm sorry, it's not 10v10, I don't know what I was thinking, 99. Besides the numbers of being 99, it's everything else is the laws of the game. So now, no build-out lines, none of that stuff. They're allowed to head the ball at these ages, not U11s, but U12s. But they are allowed to punt. And like I said, like Frank pointed out, that is a good point, and that's something I've forwarded on to the National Youth Technical Committee. But 11 and unders are not allowed to head the ball, but besides that, everything else is the regular laws of the game for 12 and unders. So it is 99. I apologize. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why I put 10v10 at the top, but it is 99 for the small-sided game. Any questions about that one? That one's probably the easiest to wrap your head around.
Well, it is, except you're going to get a real pushback for not having it competitive at U12 or U11. But
yeah, and I've asked several states. There's a lot of states in Region 2 that have what they call a Juniors State Cup for 12 and unders. And most of Region 2 and U.S. Youth has always been on the festival philosophy for 10 and unders, 8 and unders. But most states have had some kind of competitive event for 12 and unders. So it's definitely something that U.S. Youth, it's a question that's been raised with U.S. Youth. But again, the problem is U.S. Youth does not trump U.S. Soccer. So, and that's something where South Dakota State Soccer, our development committee, we have a championship for the U12s at the Midco Cup. What are we going to do with that this next year? And I'm going to have that discussion with the development committee. I totally understand. I mean, I get pushback for having a non-championship division for the 10 and unders. People tell me they're not going to come play in our event because we don't have a championship for 10 and unders. So my biggest question to U.S. Soccer has been, is everybody, it's going to be easier if everybody complies, right? If there's certain events where the 12 and unders are still being able to play for a junior state cup, it's going to be a lot harder to follow suit or to follow what they're asking us to do here. But I think that's on a lot of the, the biggest question everybody's asking is how much is U.S. Soccer going to make sure people comply with this? Because like I said, there's a lot of money to be had to charge a 10 and under team to play 11 aside and be called the, the 10 and under World Cup champions for their state, playing 11 aside. And parents like to see their kids playing something that looks like what they just saw on TV. So I think a lot of these mandates, it's going to be interesting to see how they play out.
But right now, if an association applied for a tournament and said that their U12 was going to be competitive, they'd probably certify it.
As of right now, yeah. I mean, we have several events that were sanctioned for the spring, summer already. So those are things that we're going to have to go back and, yeah. But, I mean, as of right now, the Midco Cup is probably still going to have the 12 and under division. And like I said, the mandates don't go into effect. It was January 1st, 2017, and now it's August 2017. So they don't go into effect till August 2017, so we have a year to kind of play with this. And then I think also the biggest thing for me is going to be to ask the states around us, what are they doing? I think it's easier for us to follow suit with what everybody else around us is doing. Because if other states are going to do it, it makes more sense for us. If other states aren't going to do it, then our Midco or recreational championships will stay the same.
Jeremy?
Yes.
I have a question. This is Sherry. So
yep.
Our hometown league coaches going to be required to have the F license then come next year?
No. So the thing that I'm going to be bringing up at the AGM is, for travel rosters, if we should start following suit with these requirements that U.S. Soccer is asking for us. Because honestly, the only way for me, and here's the thing, I don't want it to become, and I'm pretty sure this is U.S. Soccer's feeling as well, I don't want it to become a thing where South Dakota State Soccer is dropping in on every association's fall and spring in-house leagues and policing all the coaches and policing all the players and policing, the rules of the leagues and all that kind of stuff. Now, it makes a lot more sense for us to help associations follow suit when we're approving rosters, we're approving hosting applications for events. It becomes a little bit easier for us to help associations comply when they're doing things like that. So my recommendation to the state board is going to be, it's going to make my job a little bit easier to have this be on travel rosters and event rosters rather than saying that every coach in an in-house league is following suit with this. Now, obviously, we're always pushing education. We're doing multiple youth modules this fall. I'm going to continue pushing that. And that's why I put the youth modules in this slide. That's not a U.S. Soccer thing, obviously. That's a U.S. youth thing. But we offer those modules for free. So why wouldn't associations take advantage of those over requiring their coaches to pay $25 for an F license or $100 for an E license, right? So I think there's, obviously we want to push coaches to get educated, but I don't know how I would police that with in-house leagues. I honestly don't.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree because our association is all about the education. It's just getting our volunteer parents that are coaching these
sure.
teams to follow in that suit.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, perfect world. every coach fills out their disclosure form, and it takes them to a link for the F license, and they can either put their F license number in to say they've satisfied it, or they take it and they haven't done it right. So, but yeah, I get it. I mean, our state's run by volunteer coach parents, so yeah, I totally get that. So, and again, I honestly don't want to be the person that's driving around checking for everybody's F license certificate. So.
Okay.
But yeah, it will be my recommendation to the board of directors at the AGM that we approve a policy for travel rosters to start moving in that direction. Obviously, we won't say it has to be done immediately, but the high school, we used to have that, right? It used to be a 2-year window to get a D license for the high school program. I think we can do something similar for event and travel teams. Especially when the modules are free and the F license is $25. Anything else? It's 9:34, so I would definitely want to be respectful, but if somebody has a question, I want to make sure that it's addressed for the good of the group.
I move to adjourn.
So moved. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. I definitely want to say thank you for all the time, energy, and effort that you guys put into growing this game in South Dakota. I do appreciate you taking a night, an hour from tonight, and tuning into this. Like I said, if I did this correctly and hit record the right way, this whole presentation should be recorded. I will try and get it up on the state website. I will try and email that link to everybody as well as a follow-up. If there are people in your association that you think would be beneficial to hear this, tournament directors or in-house league directors, things like that, please forward that on to them. And I will put the PowerPoint presentation on the website as well. But I would say, A, refer to what U.S. Soccer, the PowerPoint they sent out first. And then this is obviously just a little bit of a synopsis. So, thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks for being here.
Night.
Thanks.